So today I'm going to be answering the question, how much money do you really need to retire? I mean, do you really need $1 million? Well, the answer to that is no. And I'm going to talk to you about it coming up next. Hi everybody, my name is Dee Burks and this is Retirement Rescue, where we talk about how to make money, save money, and create a retirement from nothing. Well, people are always thinking, hey, I've got to have $1 million in the bank. I can't retire. I'm going to have to work my whole life. And let me tell you what, that is just not true. People get hyper-focused on trying to create this huge pile of money when in reality, they really need to be thinking about cash flow. How much money you have in retirement is really based on what you need every single month. And there are many sources for that income to come from in retirement. It does not have to be a humongous pile of cash. Most people hobble together a retirement from a multitude of things they have in their life, be it fixed income sources or variable income sources, and for most of us it's both. So let's talk about those and how they work. Now when you think about a fixed income source, that can be something like Social Security. It may be a veteran pension. It may be a pension from a previous employer or several previous employers. It can be anything that is a set monthly amount that doesn't vary a great deal. It may go up slightly for cost of living, but it doesn't really vary. It's more or less a set amount that you're going to receive the rest of your life. Now let's talk about the variable sources of income. For a lot of people in retirement or semi-retirement, that might mean a part-time job. That's a variable source of income. That might mean something like drawing money out of a 401k, an IRA, a 403b, any of those retirement accounts that you actually fund yourself. Now, the average person in this country has way less than $100,000 in their 401k or IRA. The average is right at $63,000, which is not much. So if that's you, or you don't have any money in one of those things, it doesn't mean you can't retire. It just means you have to look at other sources of income. There are numerous people in retirement that will have something like a rental property. That provides a lot of their retirement income. And while you may not think you want to be a landlord, it's actually a very good source of income. When I was a young married person, we had a bunch of kids at home. Across the street lived an older lady, and I've talked about her before. Her name was Miss Gentry. She had some fixed income sources. Her husband was already deceased, but she had her own Social Security. She had some of his pension. She had a part-time job at a local fabric store, and she had a house that rented for about $1,500 a month at the time. This was 10 years ago, so it was a nice house. And it's something that she and her husband had paid off during the course of their married life. It was the house right next door. That provided a substantial income for her, and it was just one house. So it wasn't that big a deal for her to do by herself. But as you go into retirement, being able to be open-minded and look at all these different income sources and figuring out how you're going to put together your retirement is key. But one of the first things you have to do is figure out, okay, how much are you going to need a month? This is one of the reasons that all those videos and all those financial experts that are telling you how much you need to retire are kind of full of it. There is no set number because it depends on where you live, what kind of lifestyle you want to live. Maybe you're going to live on $30,000 a year and your neighbor's going to live on $150,000 a year. That's a tremendous difference. There's no one that can give you a set number for everybody. So you think about you. How much money per month are you going to need to retire? And how much is that per year? Let's say yours is between $3,000 and $5,000 a month. That's $36,000 to $60,000 a year. But one thing you really have to think about is inflation. If all of the sources of income that you have are a set amount, as inflation skyrockets, and those of us who remember the 70s, we remember really bad inflation. And as it skyrockets, things get so much more expensive, it really cuts your buying power. This is one reason it's so important to have not only those set income sources, but variable income sources. If you have a part-time job, if you have a rental property, if you have a business that produces some kind of income, that's going to keep up with inflation. Whereas your fixed income won't. So you really have to think about inflation. But let's go back to the scenario of you're going to want between $36,000 and $60,000. Now, if you're a couple, maybe that number is well over $100,000. Maybe it's $100,000, maybe it's $150,000. It depends on what lifestyle you're used to living. And this is in a low-cost area I'm talking about. This is not living in San Francisco or New York or a very high-cost area. If you live in one of those areas, you have to either figure out how you're going to create an income that allows you enough money, or you're going to have to relocate to a lower cost area. That's your choice. But the first thing you do is you figure out your number. How much money do you need coming in every month? And then you can make decisions on how to make that happen. And if you've watched my channel for any length of time, you know one of the biggest ways to increase your income in retirement is lower your expenses. Pay off that debt. You don't want to carry debt into retirement. That can get you in trouble really quickly, especially if all or most of your income is going to be a fixed amount. You don't have that variability to pay off debt as quickly as you did when you were working and you could vary your income. You don't have that if your sources are fixed. So you want to pay off that debt as quick as you can, or even before you get to retirement. You also have to look at your expenses. There are so many people who, quote, plan for retirement, and in their heads, because they've gone over the numbers numerous times, they know that, okay, the retirement income is going to be maybe 80% of what I'm making now. But they don't scale back their lifestyle. Once they retire, not only do they continue living the same lifestyle, they travel, they do things, they start spending money, and before you know it, they have way less money than they thought they did. It's one of the biggest mistakes I see retirees make. Scale back that lifestyle before you get to retirement. Be sure that the money you have coming in is going to be sufficient. You don't want to have been retired 3 or 4 years and then all of a sudden realize, oh no, I'm going to have to go back to work full time just to make it. That is not a good place to be. So planning ahead, getting rid of debt, and then scaling back your lifestyle to meet that retirement goal is really, really important. Now, once you've done those things, there are other ways to look at your expenses. If you have a house, maybe you have a sibling that is needing housing as well, and you can split expenses by living together. Maybe you can rent out a room or an extra granny house you have in the back of your house. There are various ways to create lower housing expenses. And for most seniors and retirees, housing is a big deal. It is one of the biggest expenses you have. That and food, really, medicine, are some of the biggest expenses you have. And housing is within your control. So look at those housing options and figure out, okay, how can I, quote, increase my income by just lowering my expenses? When you are on a fixed income, the lower your average regular expenses can be, the more money you have to spend and the bigger cushion you have should inflation really ramp up. Now let's say maybe you like the idea of getting a rental property or something that produces income. If you are above the age where there is no penalty, perhaps you can take some money out of one of those self-funded retirement accounts like a 401k or IRA and purchase one of those. That can be a great way for you to increase income, increase your asset base, and your renter is really paying the mortgage on it. You're getting a little extra, they're paying the mortgage, depending on how much you put down and how expensive it is. But you really have to look at numerous different options. The best thing you can do is that early in your retirement or before you retire, really set yourself up for success. Give yourself options. Now let's talk about that $1 million. Okay, if you have gone to a financial advisor or anyone and they talk about how you take money out of a retirement account, a lot of them will tell you, well, you want to keep that withdrawal to around 4%. Okay, if you have $1 million and you're withdrawing 4% a year, 4%, like they tell you, that $1 million is only going to give you $40,000 a year. So the idea that this big $1 million is going to somehow save your retirement is really false. Number one, it's not enough money, especially if you're wanting to take out $100,000, $150,000. It wouldn't last 6 or 7 years at the most. So it's just not practical for most people, especially the closer you get to retirement. However, putting together all these different cash flow streams is very possible, even if you don't have a lot of money right now. This is what I'm doing. It's cash flow retirement. I did a video on this, well, actually some time ago, over a year ago. And a lot of people really like that video because that's where people are. It is not really practical necessarily for most people to try and build this humongous cash account of $1 million or $2 million if they don't have it already. It's just really probably not going to happen. So figuring out and making plans and planning ahead for how you're going to put together your streams of cash flow to create your retirement can give you a lot of peace of mind. And if you're like most people who semi-retire and then retire, they realize, oh my gosh, I could have done this years ago. And when you think about it in cash flow terms, you can probably retire way sooner than you ever thought you could. So really think about that. Think about cash flow, not pile of cash. And put yourself in a position where you can really retire as soon as possible and enjoy that retirement. Now, if you've enjoyed this video, please click subscribe, and I'll see you next time.